Hey everyone, welcome to the Midpoint Review. I'm your host, AJ Tabando, and we've got a great show for you today. I'm joined by my friend Jared Walker, who has spent the past decade and a half working in politics, advocacy, hip hop, and communications. One of these things is not like the other, and that is what makes him so awesome. We talk about so much on this episode. One thing we discuss at length is intergenerational relationships, the frustration many of us have with the boomers still clinging to power, the sense of arrested development amongst our generation when it comes to stepping into power as a result, and the need to give the generations coming up behind us something to believe in. We talk about how increasingly time is a flat circle, whether that is in fashion or politics, and we seem stuck in this doom loop of history that we really need to find a way out of. And we talk about community, the topic that seems to come up on every single episode here, and the need to regain our humanity and connection on small things if we want to be able to achieve big things together. I think you guys are really going to love this one. Before we get started, a shout out to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Coffee is my most important meal of the day, and I wouldn't trust it to anyone else. Habit's smooth, full-bodied, world-class diner roast helps me get out of bed and into gear. I like to smash 3 cups in the morning and vibrate straight into the afternoon. But don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself by visiting www.habitcoffeeclub.com to order a bag or sign up for a subscription and use the promo code MIDPOINT at checkout for 20% off. That's www.habitcoffeeclub.com. All right, let's start the show. Welcome everyone to the Midpoint Review. I'm super excited for today's guest, Jared Walker. Jared is a leader, bridge builder, and storyteller with over 15 years of experience in politics, advocacy, and media in Canada and the US. He has been on the front lines of many of the most significant political moments in the past decade, and he is the vice chair of the Broadbent Institute's board of directors, the founding chair of the Black Youth Fellowship at Toronto City Hall, and has recently stepped into the role of executive director for Canadians for Tax Fairness. He's one of the more thoughtful and reflective people I know, and I'm super excited to hear his thoughts on navigating the midpoint in life, particularly in these chaotic times. So, Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. That's a much nicer intro than the one that's on my LinkedIn. I should steal it.
Yeah, I'll clip it afterwards and send it to you. So, right before I hit record,
Yes.
we were lamenting how time is a flat circle, and we have slipped right back into a vortex of being in a moment about 20 years ago. Do you want to just share for our listeners
the
article that you stumbled across?
I will say there's this absolutely dreadful piece in the latest GQ called "The Secret to Looking Hot in 2025: Dress Like It's 2005." And I feel like this is like the Call of Cthulhu. This is the harbinger of the end of universe.
For those listening to the audio, it is a picture of 2 young people, because everybody looked young now, wearing striped polo t-shirts, and the girl's shirt is up a little bit, showing that she's wearing a belly chain.
Yeah.
Which I would argue, and did, that is actually kind of circa 1995 culture, because 2005 was a lot of velour, juicy tracksuits and Von Dutch trucker hats.
Yes.
I think we can all predict where we're going from here next, and none of it is going to look good.
Yeah, I was saying that I feel like if there's anything that explains the being governed by the dumbest people, entering wars that are unnecessary, it's all space-time is just collapsing in on itself.
We've been so caught up looking for recession indicators that we failed to watch for World War indicators.
World War indicators, exactly.
It just slipped that one in underneath us while we were distracted with other things. So,
jeez.
But so speaking of the early 2000s, and a little bit more about yourself for the listeners who might not know you and kind of didn't get enough with my lovely intro of you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I will just note, to be directional here, that you have an Obama poster behind you. So taking us back to, circa Middle East terrible decisions and, perhaps what could come next that might be more hopeful. Tell us about yourself, Jared.
How to do this succinctly.
We have time. I can make this as long as you want. So don't worry about tell us a story.
I guess the thing that I always start with in like my life journey is I am a child of immigrants of immigrants in the sense that I arrived here. I was born in the U.S. My mom, who is Jamaican, is very adamant about how that was an accident and I wasn't meant to be one of those damn Americans. But I arrived in the U.S. nonetheless. But my mom is Jamaican. My father was from the Dominican Republic, though I didn't know him, and I spent like a good chunk of my life in the Caribbean and then a little bit in the US and Miami. And then we moved to Canada. And then after school here, I went back to the US for university. I went to Columbia, which is where I stumbled into a politically significant moment by no skill or quality of myself beyond being there. And I had the really great fortune of getting the chance to be the New York State coordinator for the student wing of the Obama campaign. So I ran all of the various college and high school chapters of Students for Obama in New York. And that happy accident charted the rest of my life professionally, basically. And I've done a lot of things since then, some of them that are like seem reasonably aligned, like I've been a political speechwriter. I've been a political director of communications and a special advisor and a political consultant and other things like that. But I have also like run communications for Toronto's oldest hip hop festival, records, like been the hip hop buyer at Cops Records on Queen. I've done a lot of really random things too, which people are always like surprised about. So those are the broad contours of my sort of journey to get here. And yeah, and here these days is I'm a couple weeks into this new gig as executive director of Canadians for Tax Fairness. We're basically a think tank, a small but mighty think tank that like does research and advocacy to make taxes more fair, and in particular to close things like corporate tax loopholes, tax havens, like the sort of tools of the trade that the very wealthiest people and particularly the biggest corporations use to avoid paying taxes and therefore make everybody's life worse. So that's kind of what we do. And yeah, and I'm vice chair of the Broadbent Institute, which is fantastic. We do progressive work, democracy building at home and abroad, and try and carry on Ed's legacy, Ed, who passed recently, which is yeah.
It's amazing. So many things. And I love the way that some of them make sense and they all make sense. Like, but some of them are a little more of a clear through line and some of them aren't. Yeah. How do you decide what you want to do with your time? Like, how do you decide what work to take on and like what draws you into the more sort of random things? Like, yeah.
I have tried every other version of a way to be than the way that I am. And this was always true. Like in school, I always wasn't as good as I wanted to be at the things that I didn't care about. And I've always found those things to be more difficult. And I would invent various ways to avoid doing those things or to use the skills that I did have to emotionally manipulate people into not making me do those things.
Nice. I appreciate that at this point in your life, you can acknowledge that honestly.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I know that this teacher is soft and I can push these buttons so I don't have to do this thing I don't want to do. Which honestly was the beginning of understanding people, and that has gotten me far in my career. But at this, yeah, if I find something interesting, I will throw my entire self into that thing. And if I don't find it interesting, then I will really even struggle to pay attention to it. Especially at this point, there's like, you've only got so much life to live, and I don't want to spend it doing things that I don't think are valuable and make the world better for other people. And yeah, make you want to get up in the morning.
Yeah, totally. And I think, for me, like I've, been living life and doing stuff for long enough now that like I can really sense when I've stumbled into something that just isn't aligned. And that doesn't mean it's not like a good thing or a worthy thing or that it's got good people around it. Like I think for a long time, I would convince myself like if the conditions seemed good, like I was like, then I should do that. But even if it didn't feel right. And now I think I'm at a point where it's like, I don't have enough hours in the day to do all the things I want to do. And I've done enough things that are super aligned with what I want to do to
Yeah.
really pick up on when it's not. Yeah, and you're totally right that you just don't put the energy into stuff in the same way, and
Mhm.
it's just not fun, right? So okay, so you've come up through the rides that was, the last 20 years of time being a flat circle, which means we're all hitting a point in life where we're at that midpoint phase. Do you feel like you're kind of like, does the idea of a midpoint resonate with you? Does that feel like a moment that you're in, or do you feel like you're still kind of evolving towards it?
It's funny. When you sent me this, I'm like, I don't need you to at me like this. I was like, in my head, I literally was on the agenda with Steve Paikin, and he asked me some question that I like could not answer because I was like, Steve,
I'm a baby.
you're old and this guy's old, but I'm not old.
I
Like,
saw
I
that.
just got here.
I know. No, man. I know.
Yeah.
So in fairness, you're not the only person
Yeah.
who has had that reaction to be like, but I'm 22. Why do you like, no, this
Yeah.
isn't relevant to me. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
honey.
No, I had to start accepting the reality when I remember I was like hanging out in a park next to like a basketball court, ball rolls over, and I like pick up the ball and like toss it back to one of the kids playing, and he's like, "Thanks, boss," and I was like, "Boss."
Oh yeah.
And then I worked a campaign recently. I worked the last Ontario campaign, and then the digital team that I was working with, they're all fantastic, all in their 20s.
Yeah.
And the digital director that I dropped in to help, kind of uh, to do some assisting with, wrote me a really lovely note after, and in it he said something like, you know, wise elder, and I was like, oh fuck,
Oh,
man.
yeah, that's a gut punch right there.
I was like, damn. But also, yeah, I mean, like, I mentor people now, like, that's part of my role in the ecosystem. And, like, as a person who never really had a mentor, or at least, like, not one for any length of time, I had one mentor, but he passed untimely. But yeah, I'm like, oh shit, this is kind of where I'm at now. So yeah.
Yeah. The tagline at one point for this podcast was putting the elder in elder millennial, because
Yeah.
that's kind of what it is. And it's funny because I mean, to be fair, you are on the young side of the midpoint. So just, I am reaching a little bit, but I knew you would be a great interview for this. But I also think so part of me wanting to do this was to define this moment a little bit for
Mhm.
us and for a generation, because I think that there is so much power in acknowledging that you are on the other side of a journey of acquiring wisdom, right? That you are a mentor now, that you are a leader now, that you have power. Like you're walking into, like, you're an executive director. I'm a CEO. We didn't come by those titles by accident. We know how to get shit done. And so, we're walking into this phase of life where we are the adults in the room and people are looking to us. And I think it's really easy to kind of not shirk that, but just be like, but not realize, not fully step into it, right? Be like,
Yeah.
but I'm still like the young kid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are in a very fucked up moment in the world and a
Yeah.
moment of opportunity. Like all these things are tied together. And so, yeah, so I think there is something like a little bit of like calling in, of being like, okay, guys, like it's been a ride, but we are old now.
Yeah.
But let's do something with it.
Yeah, I think there's also the additional element of like that the generation that is the generations that, and I'll lump the Gen Xers in with us too, but the people that are like the boomers will not fucking leave. Like I also feel like a baby sometimes, because if I'm in most settings, if I were to like stumble into the PMO, not likely these days with my political alignment, but or right, like if I went out west and worked in BC or wherever, or if I went back to the US and worked in government and there was a Democratic administration, the president is a jillion years old, like truly. The prime minister, these guys have not left.
Yeah.
The generational baton passing has not happened. And it has put us in this kind of weird situation where it's harder to step into your role as an adult, because the people that were in charge when you were a kid, they're still in charge.
It's true. It's true. I notice that sometimes when I'm watching, like, I don't watch a lot of like cable TV anymore, but I was like, it was like, this was years ago, but I remember watching like Sportsnet or TSN or something, and Rod Black was like announcing something. Anyway, it struck me because I was like in my late 30s at that point, and I had watched that guy announce shit on TSN when I was like 9 years old.
Yeah.
You know? And it was like, it's such a little example, but it was just one of those things where I was like, there's one job for this. Like, this is one job. This is one role that someone gets to have. And this guy has had it for 30 years, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and no, like, no shade to Rod Black. I don't even know if he's still working now, but like, it was just striking that it's like, it was, I don't know, I just had this moment of being like, what the fuck are you guys still all doing here? Like, there's other stuff to do. It's not saying like go disappear completely, but like, so okay, this is something that I've thought about. Like, why do we think that this is happening? My theory is that this is a generation who has not done anything to build an identity outside of work and is terrified of losing work because they will lose their sense of self and don't know their lives outside of it. That's been my theory, but I would love to hear if you have a theory on that.
No, I think that's mostly spot on. Is like is a generation that hasn't built self-identity outside of work, that hasn't done work on self in general. Like, this is like largely not done therapy, not like addressed childhood wounds, all of the things that and it's just, and is clinging, and in so many places, like, rather than like moving on gracefully to the next stage of things, is stuck in this sort of in the amber in their minds, but not actually. And then I feel like that has really affected the natural state of things in any number of different ways. And I mean, like, that's not to say that's the only reason why. Like, our economic system is an absolute catastrophe for most people. And that has all of the effects of that. But like, a combination of those things is like, I think the effect that it has on us is like one thing, but I also I look back behind us and I look at like the Gen Zs, and like, I can see how that is affecting like an entire generation that is basically just never believed in the social contract. And I'm like, this has very, very negative outcomes for us politically. Like, I think one of the things that we always thought about growing up, especially, is like, not everybody in our generation is progressive, obviously, but like, as people who are like generally liberal minded, whether like even if you were socially liberal but fiscally conservative or whatever, right? Like, well, like, we just need to wait for these old people get out of the way, and then everything's gonna be fine.
Right.
The consequence of these old people not getting out of the way, in part, has been that the younger generation has become like incredibly radicalized in a lot of ways, and is actually more conservative than we are.
Yeah.
And that worries me. Like, and like, not conservative in the same ways that the boomers are conservative either, but like conservative in the ways that they're like, none of this shit works, blow it up. I don't remember even what it was like to live with somebody who remembers fascism, so like, fuck it, let's go for it. Like, and that's a vast oversimplification, but that's a thing that I definitely see, and also exacerbated by social media and our media environment in general, and our economic system and a whole bunch of other things. But
yeah, it's true. It's you know, when there is this sort of like clogging up of the system, like, part of the challenge too, and I see this more, I'm struck by it more in the US maybe than I am here in Canada, though that's not to say that it's not happening here as well. But you know, the like the Democratic Party is like a gerontoc, right? Like, it is so old. I mean, older than the Republican Party now, which is crazy. And it seems like that has, like, even if you can say all day long that like you care about people other than yourself or other than your world, and you want to be like an empathetic leader who understands people's experiences outside of your own, but
Yeah.
like it's also just naturally very challenging to do that. And if you're a person who like will not have to live with the consequences of the decisions that you're making, I think that that dramatically changes how you make decisions, whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
heaviness of some of these decisions is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not real. It's constructed, right? And so there's, there's part of that too, in that like the decisions being made, there's a short-termness to it because the lives of the people who are making these decisions, there's a
Hmm.
short-termness to them, right? And then I think to your point around Gen Z, it's scary, but it's also not like what other conclusions might you
Yeah.
come
What
to
might you draw? Yeah. Yeah.
if you
Absolutely.
were I was thinking about this the other day because someone I was talking to who's a little bit older was just talking about like, the kids, like interns coming in and young people these days, they don't want to work
Hmm.
the same way. They don't have the same relationship to work.
Hmm.
Personally, I'm like, yeah, no, it's a good thing. I want their relationship to work, not
Not
yours.
yours. Yeah.
But part of me, like, so, I imagine a lot of it is just being young. Everybody's, like, everyone's like, oh, what's wrong with these young people? And it's like, they're just young. You were like that too.
Yeah.
There's probably social media changes everything. There's probably a little bit of that. But also, like, they have never, as you said, come up in a world where the social contract delivered.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think about like how old were they during the Great Recession, and how
Yeah.
many of them watched their families lose their jobs, right? And subsequently have watched their parents probably lose their jobs again and again and again, regardless of how hard they're working.
Yeah.
Like, that is the only world that they have known. And so, like, the message is loud and clear to them that, like, it doesn't matter how hard you work, nothing is
Hmm.
affordable. Like,
Yeah.
even if you have a good job, it's extremely challenging to afford anything these days.
Yeah.
Nothing's certain. And so, I'm going to take care of myself and prioritize myself,
Yeah.
or just get really angry and burn it all down, or step aside and let other people burn it all down and just focus on taking care of myself,
Yeah.
and it's like it's not okay, but it strikes me as a pretty rational response to the kind of world that they've come up in.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, like, I don't think that I could say it better than that. I really, yeah.
Okay,
It,
so that's super depressing.
no, but I think like it speaks to the conversation that we were having before about. I think like this is my take, and um, I know that there's a wide cross section of folks that you've talked to, and so some people at this take will roll their eyes, and that's okay. But I think like the present dominant, both economic and sort of philosophic, like the superstructure, to use a Marxist word, that like we've all built everything on, the dominant superstructure that we've built everything on is individualism, right? And that is great in so many ways. We have like so many things that we have gotten: individual rights, all of these things, the largest wealth creation system that the world has ever seen, though the distribution of that wealth has not been equal. Like there's lots of things that we've gotten out of this.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I feel like we don't grapple with, particularly in the West, and especially I think in our corner of the West, like in the US and Canada, and I feel this a lot because I have one foot in the global South all the time,
Yeah.
is how this has absolutely shattered community
Yeah.
and the consequences that has, like ranging from the fact that our our parents as a unit, our parents and even our grandparents are still working because they don't want to pass out of what they think is the thing that is valuable about life and then become non-entities as they see it, right? And so that makes it difficult for everybody else in the rest of the stream. Like it makes it harder for those of us who are in this stage of our life to like move into a fulsome adulthood, but we're still taking care of our parents who and parenting our parents, but they refuse to be related to in that fashion. And then the people that are coming behind us are like, this isn't working. And so the generational relationships are broken.
Yeah.
I have if I have talked to one person, I've talked to 1,000 people that is a millennial or a younger Gen Xer or an older Gen Z, that is like mentorship or like the existence of elders, like generational dialogue is like kaput broken. And the thing is, like, we need them for things. It's just that the things that we need them for are not the things that they're doing right now. Like, I don't want a 72-year-old, a 75-year-old to be the person who takes the call at 2 a.m. And makes the decision that will have knock-on effects for the rest of our lives. But what I do want them to be is the person who's in the corner, who's in at the table in the room, and to be like, I see where you're going with this. This is what happened the last time we did this, like to provide context and to provide a perspective that people who are 30, 40, 50 don't have, because they have not lived that much life, right? That's what we need those people for. But they don't want it. And I don't want to say this like as a holistic pejorative, but like overall, that generation is not taking up that place. And that's making it really difficult in a whole bunch of respects. And then on top of that, I think, like, I don't have kids, but I am Uncle Jared a million times over at this point with my siblings' kids. My sister's about to have a baby girl. My older brother has 2 girls. Like my friends, lots of kids. I'm a godfather.
Amazing.
And when I think about like the relationship that my friends who are parents have to parenting, I'm also like, all of these people in their 2-person units, if they're lucky, going through this incredibly difficult task almost alone. And that is, we're maybe, I would say, in the West anyway, the 2nd or 3rd generation to be doing this horrible experiment of doing the task of bringing up a human being, which really should be done with like a massive contingent of people, doing that in the tiniest, most ineffective unit. And everybody's exhausted and everybody's burnt out. And I'm like, this is not good.
No, I mean, and we're also, I think, we're like maybe the 3rd generation to do it as a duo or individuals. And I think we're the 1.5 second to do it with 2 full-time working parents, right?
Yeah.
Because even like, my mom worked full-time, but she was a bit of an anomaly in her generation. Most like women worked, but like not the same way I think a lot of them work now, except for some exceptions. But just all that to say, yes, 100%. So it's really interesting. I've done maybe 7 or 8 interviews now for this podcast. And the one thing that has consistently come up, I think, on every single one is a conversation about community and the loss of community and how that is something that we need to bring back, and that we are really like, there seems to be a shared recognition that while a lot of the institutions that we have are broken and all these big structures around us are broken, there is this human connection that has broken down, and this sort of shared responsibility to each other, and this like recognition of collective work to each other that we've lost. And I think it's really interesting how, like you said, I've interviewed a broad group of people, and no matter kind of your leaning or your background or your work, the recognition that this whole exercise of pretending we can all just be these, rugged individuals, and it is not working, and is a root cause of so many of the other challenges, and is created by a lot of the systems and structures. Like, we now live in an economy that requires both people within a family unit, more or less, to work full time, or if you're lucky, work full time one job. Likely for many people, it's working multiple jobs. And then paying someone to take care of your kids, because that's now a paid service as opposed to a shared service. But it's really striking to me that this is a shared recognition that community is a vital piece that we've lost, that we really need to work to regain.
Yeah. And I would argue also that it's a reinforcing thing. Like, the structures that we live in create this problem and make it worse, because if you don't have, if your community, your interpersonal community is broken, if you don't do small things together, then the idea of doing large things together, which is basically like when people are like government, taxes, like who needs them? I'm like, these are just literally all the things that like all of us as individuals, we can't do by ourselves. You, like me and my partner, can't build a hospital with a radiology lab by ourselves. We can't
Right.
build a road by ourselves. So we
Right.
all get together, whether or not we fucking like each other, and we decide these are the universe of things that we have to do together.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what government is. And the thing that enables us to do those things is taxes. That's really, that's the fundaments of our political system. But if we don't do child rearing, if we don't do friendship and relationship, if we don't do looking after people who are sick, like these sorts of things, if you don't know your neighbors, like on that micro level, then the idea that you could live in a world where you don't know the people closest to you, but then you leapfrog that and you have this idea of a super community sense, the idea of our sense
Right.
as a community, of a city, of a province, of a nation, is absurd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, how are we gonna do that shit if how are we gonna do that shit if like my friends who have kids can't come out because like can't take a break because it's like, oh, the sitters and then there's
Yeah.
nobody to like.
Well, it's so true. I think two things. One of them is community. It not just helps you do those small things together, but it connects you. It reminds you of the humanity of each other. And I
Yeah.
think that the more we lose that sense of recognizing ourselves in other people,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it becomes to be dismissive of the big things, or like, when it comes to cutting certain things and being like, or like people who use those services are just lazy bums and my tax dollars shouldn't go to them. Well, if you actually have connections and relationships with people and you've encountered people who have used those things and you realize like, these are just people, these are just
Yeah.
like, and someone's got on hard times or whatever it is, right? But it's the humanity of each other that allows all these bigger structures to exist. And the more we atomize ourselves and individualize ourselves, we can start to project all these images onto people and forget that they're just real humans doing stuff.
I think in addition to that, like there's the idea that even the people that I feel like I've been coming up against this a lot, particularly in the last year. So like the last year's been a weird one for me professionally.
Yeah.
Up until very recently, kind of, I was like freelance consulting. And so it'd be like 3 projects, lots to do, no time. And then like 3 months with like tumbleweed, right? And in speaking to some of my friends and catching up with some of my friends, it's like a whole range of things. My partner is an actor. The post-strike kind of world has been really destabilizing for a lot of people in her field. One of my best friends from college is an Emmy-winning journalist. She's been in a weird place these past few years. And I've been like, it's so funny because the ways that we connect with each other have become more and more superficial. If somebody looked at my Instagram, they'd be like, "Oh, you were in Costa Rica for a month, like vibing, like you were good."
Yeah.
And I was like, actually, I had already booked that trip and I was laid off the day before I got on the plane, right? But nobody would know, right?
Yeah.
And I think like we're all sort of in these chambers where we've convinced ourselves that everybody else is doing great except for us. So even the people that you do know and that you do relate to, you relate to them through the prism, through this like funhouse mirror of all of the carefully curated best moments of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unless you are really, really in conversation with people and you actually get to see them, which is hard because as we've said, everybody works like everybody's working, and all of the responsibilities that you have and everything, you get more reinforced by only the things that look like people are doing well. And then that makes you feel like you're uniquely trash for not doing, and that further degrades the social fabric too.
Totally. It becomes this performance of community. I think social media is a performance of community. It's a performance of self. And then it's these, likes and comments that feel like engagement, but is actually all just, a contribution to the performance. And it actually is so, especially if you're in a down time, it can start to
Mhm.
feel so hollow, right? And then I think the other thing that it does is that because it tricks you into thinking everybody's good,
Mhm.
when you are having a moment of struggle, you might be less likely to reach out to people
Yeah.
because you're like, well, I don't want to bum them out, or I don't want to show
Mhm.
myself when, I'm not in a good place. And it's these moments where you need community the most
Mhm.
that you might hold yourself back from reaching out to it. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, it can be incredibly inconvenient, right? Like it
Yeah.
requires you to sometimes be inconvenient to others when you're asking for something and you're like, oh, I don't
Mhm.
want to be, I'm conditioned to not be a bother to anybody, right? It requires you to do things or contribute to someone sometimes in a way where it might be easier and more convenient for you not to, right? And I think that like this, so that's just something too, this whole convenience lifestyle of everything's got to be easy and like,
Mhm.
don't be a nuisance. I remember when I moved into my neighborhood, there's a whole bunch of people, families my age, my kids' age in the neighborhood, which is amazing. And a couple of weeks after we moved in, one of my neighbors knocked on the door for a cup of sugar.
No way.
Yeah, and there is a convenience store like a block and a half away. Like it's not
Yeah.
even a 5-minute walk to go get anything they want there. But they came to my house and asked for a cup of sugar, and I
Mhm.
fucking loved it. First, like just the nostalgia factor of it all was wonderful.
Yeah.
But it was such an act of community, and
Yeah.
it was such an act of, and it was, quote unquote inconvenient, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, asking to take something from me, right? They're asking to come in, but it's like, but that's what it is. Like I was so joyful to give them this, and like, and we had a chat on the stoop, and like,
Yeah.
and it was just like making that conscious choice of being like, you know what, I'm not going to walk down the street and pay $5 for a bag of sugar. I'm just going to knock on my neighbor's door and see if I can borrow a cup. And
Mhm.
like, I've since knocked on her door for an egg when I was baking and ran an egg, and
Oh,
it's like you said, sometimes these small things, like that's what it takes to start to do big things too.
yeah. Absolutely agree. That's
Um,
really, I love that.
Right? I know. So like, yeah, knock on your neighbor's door and ask for sugar. That's if you're like, I don't know where to start in this big, crazy, messed up World War III world.
Yeah.
Start with a cup of sugar. Okay, so I'm appreciative of the time, and I think this has just been a really wonderful conversation. I have two more questions
Yeah.
before
Let's
we
do it.
wrap it up. So going positive for a
Yes.
second, our generation is in this moment, whether we like it or it's normal or how we're experiencing it or not. What do you think, if there's one sort of piece of advice or one opportunity that we have right now to start to shift the trajectory of things, what do you think it is?
I mean, a thing that I often say, and I did not coin this phrase, but I find it to be supremely useful, is never let a crisis go to waste.
Yes.
And the silver lining of having multiple overlapping crises is that there's a lot of opportunity
Hmm.
to do something different. Part of it, like the job that I took, like I did not spend a lot of my career in terms of even my political career thinking about inequality through the lens of taxes specifically. I spent some time, but not a lot.
Hmm.
But an opportunity I saw in this role and in this conversation, an opportunity. And I think broadly that's kind of where we're at. Like we can everybody agree, whether or not we agree about why it's broken or what we would like to do next, we can all agree that where we are at is not working for us overall. And
Yeah.
so that leaves a lot of room and a lot of bandwidth for people to do something different
Yeah.
and to have those conversations and make something new. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, like, new coalitions, new ways of doing things, or ways to do things that we used to do in a way that is relevant today. All of those sorts of things. I think that's really, it's really exciting. So in terms of a piece of advice, seek the opportunity. There's so much to do, which is like, oh, there's so much to do. But literally do one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's such fantastic advice. Is we all have access to something, right?
Yeah.
In your network, like figure out what it is that's coming up for you that you want to be involved in and just throw everything you've got at it, right? Okay, so then on that theme, My last question for you is one I ask everybody, which is, we're so often asked what kind of advice we personally would give our younger selves to live by.
Ooh.
But since this is a forward-looking podcast, what
Mm.
advice are you going to give your future self to live by?
Ooh.
Right? It's a good one. I know.
I was gonna go dark, but I won't.
You can go dark and then go light.
No, like don't forget the can opener, you know? No, but advice I would give my future self. That is like I will say that's literally a question I've never been asked. And I've done like so many panels and so many like, but that's an actually new question to me. I think a thing that I remind myself often uh when I'm working as a mentor um is like literally, and I didn't think that it would be, and it's not usually so hard, but like every once in a while I really do. I was like, remember what it was like when you were when this is where you were at.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a friend. They're like, she's like become really good friends with somebody who is like 22, and she's 30, and was like, I like this behavior is driving me crazy. I don't know what to do. And I was like, it's really not that deep. Like he gets to be 22 and maybe you don't need to be around for this particular thing
Sure.
because you get to be 30, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you get to not do that again and he has to figure it out, right? And so I think if I were to give my future self advice on that, it would be not to forget how this feels. Like this moment of trying to step into your power and feeling like simultaneously you have to fix everything, but also that you are an absolute imposter and you shouldn't be here. I think like if I were talking to myself at 50, when I am whatever version of myself that I become, and hopefully I'm like really quite in my bag and in my pocket and I like know what I'm doing and it's all execution, I think it will be helpful to remember what it was like to be to be wrestling with uncertainty in this way. And that's also advice that I would give to the people who are there right now. Is like, yeah, maybe the kids are annoying you, but like you remember what it was like. Like now add all the shit that you're living with to that. It's not ideal. So yeah, that would be my advice. Is like remember the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that is me trying to be optimistic about the future.
No, I love that. I think it's, the humility and empathy that it takes to give like a younger generation the grace to just find their way, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lot. I think yeah, I think that, the kids will figure it out, and we need to do what we can to guide them, and also do what we can. Like, I think that's such great advice. Like, maybe you just need to back off, right? Like, maybe they're just 22 and you just need to let them be 22 and remember that. So I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Jared. This has been such a good conversation. I really
Thanks so
appreciate
much
you
for
coming on
having
the
me.
show. Yeah. And I hope to have you back again sometime soon. Good luck with the new role.
Thank you so much. I'm just getting my teeth sunk into it and really enjoying it. And really, thanks again. In some ways, I was a little like on tenterhooks coming into this because of what we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
But it was really nice to do, and I think like a reminder to myself to take up that space as what I am. And I also wanted to say that the reason that the thing that like I in my Spotify Wrapped like this last year, one of my top played songs was, and I don't know if you remember this classic gem, but Jimmy Eat World, The Middle.
Oh, do I remember Jimmy Eat World, The Middle? Come on.
I've been playing this song so much.
Yes.
It's so funny. And like, but also been like, I'm fine. I'm not here. This isn't what's happening to me. But also this song gives me a lot of comfort and I don't know why.
Dude, I have a whole playlist. I just leaned into it earlier this year. I was like, you know what? I'm just done with new music. And I made a whole playlist of my like favorite like emo punk, like cousins, late 90s, everything. I'm just like, you know what, this is where I am now, and I'm just gonna embrace it. So
yes.
I'm glad. I appreciate you embracing it, and I'm so glad that this had a positive effect on you. Like I said, this podcast has turned into group therapy for millennials, and I am sure that lots of people listening to it got a lot out of it as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah. we're in the middle of the ride, but everything's going to be all right.
What an ending. All right. Thanks, Jared.
Cheers.
All right, that's our show. Thank you, Jared, for such a great conversation. And before we go, there's a story that I have to tell about Jared that I remember so well, but didn't have a chance to mention. I'm going to tell it now because he deserves his flowers, and you guys should hear it. This was an event that happened about 10 years ago. John Tory had just been elected mayor, and there was a talk being given by him and someone else, an interview panel. And I was sitting in the audience watching it. And it was one of those talks that's, feel good, softball questions. I think he had just been elected maybe a month or two before. And it was all kind of about his vision for the future of the city. And as it was wrapping up, there was time for Q&A with the audience. And, a couple of people went up to the mic and asked, equally kind of softball questions about transit or whatever. And then up walks young Jared Walker. And at the time, there was a really big controversy happening in the city around carding, which was, for those who don't know, the Toronto police had a policy where they could stop, I think, quote unquote, anyone, but it was very targeted to young Black men. To ask for their identification and kind of stop them at any time. And it was really a policy of pretty racially driven street harassment. And no one at the event had talked about it. And yet it was something that was really pretty egregious and needed to end. And so up walks Jared to the microphone. And with the poise and calmness of someone who just had his facts, had his receipts, and was here to seize his moment, he asked a super direct question to the mayor about his policy on carding and what was he going to do to stop it. And I don't remember what Tory's answer was, but what I remember was just being so blown away, watching this guy take the stage, take the moment, and not be afraid to use it. He was a bit of a fly in the ointment. That was not the vibe. And, it would have been very easy to let the opportunity to speak truth to power pass. But he chose to speak up. And I was just so impressed and so inspired by it. We often don't get to choose our moments. Sometimes, more often than not, those moments choose us. And it's all about how you decide to show up when that moment arrives. And I will be forever inspired by watching how Jared chose to meet that moment that day. So, Jared, kudos to you for continuing to show up and meet the moment in everything you do. And I will continue to be inspired by you. Thank you again to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Visit www.habitcoffeeclub.com and use the promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off your first purchase. That's it for our show today. We'll see you guys next week.